The United States has thrown its support behind the idea of adding permanent seats for African nations on the United Nations Security Council. This move is part of a broader effort to reform the UN and make it more representative of the global community. For years, African countries have called for greater representation at the Security Council, arguing that the current structure, which only grants permanent seats to the US, UK, France, Russia, and China, is outdated and does not reflect the current global power dynamics. Before we proceed, please like, comment, and subscribe to help us with the YouTube algorithm. Africa, with its population of 1.4 billion people spread across 54 nations, is underrepresented at the UN decision-making table. African leaders have consistently pointed out that while the continent is often the focus of UN resolutions and peacekeeping missions, they lack the ability to shape these decisions at the highest level. The Security Council's permanent members wield veto power, giving them outsized influence over the Council's decisions. US officials have recognized the growing importance of Africa on the global stage. With its rapidly expanding economies, rich natural resources, and strategic geopolitical importance, Africa has become a key player in global affairs. By supporting permanent seats for African nations, the US hopes to strengthen its relationships with African countries and counter the rising influence of China and Russia on the continent. This proposal aligns with US President Joe Biden's broader foreign policy approach, which emphasizes the importance of multilateral institutions and global cooperation. Biden has repeatedly expressed his commitment to reforming the UN to make it more inclusive and better equipped to address 21st century challenges, such as climate change, pandemics, and peacekeeping. However, the process of reforming the UN Security Council is complex and faces many hurdles. Changing the Council's structure requires the approval of at least 2/3 of the UN General Assembly and the agreement of all 5 permanent members of the Security Council. Historically, efforts to reform the Council have stalled due to disagreements among the permanent members, particularly when it comes to expanding the number of veto-wielding nations. Despite these challenges, the US push for permanent African representation is seen as a significant step toward reform. It is also viewed as a diplomatic signal to African nations that the US values their partnership and is committed to addressing their concerns at the global level. While the path to reform may be long, the US support for African seats on the Security Council is a clear acknowledgement of Africa's growing influence in world affairs. As the debate over UN Security Council reform continues, the question remains, which African nations would be selected for these coveted permanent seats? The decision will likely involve significant diplomatic negotiations and could reshape the future of the UN for decades to come.